Good day. I'd like to welcome you wherever you are, joining us for the webinar, Your Data, Oxygen for Your AI Journey. Um, Happy to have you here today. Just a housekeeping note, we are taking questions in the Q&A section, not in the chat section, so please make sure that you post any questions that you have there. I think it's an exciting topic, and we thank Oracle for sponsoring their cloud group and obviously their health group because of the nature of the business that we're in. I think when I see oxygen in the title of a conference, I always think of it as a double entendre. One is that it's ubiquitous, that it's everywhere, and that we need to be able to rely on it or sustain life, if you will, even in a data sense. The other thing about oxygen I find is that you don't really want to know it's there. You just suspect it's there, and it happens, and it keeps on going, keeps you alive. And I think in a technology sense, when we look at oxygen, that's the thing that some of the best technologies as we know are like oxygen, but we don't really have to bump into them to see that they're there. They just help us when they're needed. Today we have two great guests, and one coming directly from the provider side, Ravi Mercapudi, who's Director of Business Analytics at Hartford Healthcare. And we also Esteban Rubens at Oracle, Healthcare Field CTO. I'm wondering if we could just start with the perfunctory introductions. Let's start with Ravi first. Ravi, could you just tell us about your position and what your KPIs are? What makes your boss happy and your constituents happy at Harvard Healthcare?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ravi Murikpudi. I'm a director of business analytics at Hartford Healthcare. I mainly oversee the functional aspect of our business analytics side here at HHC. We are implementers. We have implemented Oracle BA apps, and since then expanding our portfolio using latest and greatest technologies with Oracle. Happy to be associated with this group. Thank you.
Thank you. Esteban?
Yeah. Hi, Frank. Happy to be here. I work at the intersection of healthcare and cloud at Oracle, which is a happy place to be because, as we heard from Larry Ellison recently, Oracle is a healthcare company now, and cloud is driving the growth of the company. So my job is to be a subject matter expert in healthcare and work with customers, partners, and internal groups to provide an industry perspective to the technology discussions.
Thank you. And my name, by the way, is Frank Catita. I'm Vice President of Chime Digital Health Excellence Group, which is the media group and the research group for Chime. So let's just jump right into it. As part of Chime, we do research called Digital Health Most Wired. And one of the things that comes up, even with the level 10, the most advanced digital transformation providers, is where they're deploying AI. And we're finding that a lot of them are using it for the more repetitive tasks, clerical type tasks, and I hesitate to use the word mundane, but in some cases it really is. So what I'd like to hear from both of you folks is does this drive that we're seeing it for that, and it's as it starts touching this rail of clinical decision support, it's the caution becomes much greater. Ravi, from your point of view at Hartford Healthcare, how would you frame this so that we could go on and look at that for the rest of the Q&A here?
Sure. So from our organization perspective, we have been taking baby steps into the analytics, business analytics and artificial intelligence space. We are far advanced in business analytics, and we have a huge realm of database. We are now trying to use the data as how we can use the data and make it a meaningful AI use case per se. Meaning how we can use that data and the wealth of knowledge that we have, and how to automate some of the mundane tasks that we are doing. For example, we are using Oracle Apex for automating the file reception part, for which is used on our ETLs. We are using AI chatbots to answer some of the most asked questions within our system. And we are also using AI chatbots to sort of build a metadata of the information that we have, so that people know where the actual data is sitting and how to easily access it without even asking like hundreds of questions to each and reaching the right team and everything. So yeah, embracing the technology with the data that we have, with the data warehouse that we have built for the past 8 years has been our mantra, and we are taking good steps in that direction.
That's great. Very helpful. Esteban, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, like I agree that the clinical side is a bit of a third rail. There are thousands of companies doing that, but our focus is not that. You know, we're drawing from our history, almost 50 years in the business applications industry and data management to do exactly what you said, to kind of erase friction from the system. We know, in healthcare, there's a ton of friction, and there's a lot of it in those mundane tasks, the repetitive tasks. And those are things that we humans are not even good at doing because we get bored. We have to do the same thing over and over. So perfect example is, reviewing claims, whether you're on the provider side before you send them out, or you're on the payer side reviewing them. This is the same stuff over and over and over. And so an automated system can be much better. We even can talk about cybersecurity. There was an interesting piece by Larry Ellison and Seema Verma a couple months ago, maybe more, where they were talking about cybersecurity and the automation of that, because we make mistakes. And so if there are certain procedures or there are certain best practices that should be applied all the time, why not automate them? So that is our focus, right? Our focus is kind of to make AI ubiquitous and transparent. And we'll leave the clinical applications to others. And even as we talk about the EHR, right? We're infusing AI into the EHR, into Fusion applications, sort of the ERP side. Those are really non-clinical use cases.
Very helpful. I mean, it goes to say there's a lot of data, and the data is increasing exponentially every day, maybe every second, depending on what business you're in. And I think because of artificial intelligence, it's increasing even more, because we're not getting rid of old data, because people say, oh my God, I might be able to use this 3 years from now when I figure out what it is. So let's just talk a little bit about what might be called the data journey in healthcare. How do you see people getting their arms around this data hoarding and management of it and organizing it? And where do you see this going as a result of AI, Esteban?
Well, first of all, I absolutely agree that we're in an infinite retention world now. It used to be that there was tension between maybe the legal side and the business side, or the legal side and the clinical side. Maybe some people want to keep more data, and legal usually said, well, when we don't need to keep it anymore, by our regulations, we'll get rid of it. Well, now it's too valuable. No one will get rid of it. And that's not just clinical data, certainly unstructured data like images, but everything, transactional data, forms. It doesn't really matter, because everything can be useful to train AI models in the environment that we operate in, with neural networks of all different kinds. So the first thing that I like to focus on is governance, because people, in healthcare, we see a lot of organizations who haven't really thought about that. So the first step of the journey is to make sense of your data, your data state. What do you have? And an analogy I like to use is going from a data jungle to a data garden, because people want to do things and they know they have a lot of data. And so a lot of discussions go like, well, we have all this data. Our board is telling us we need to do more with AI. Great. Let's roll up our sleeves. And about 80% of the time, we realize that we can't even get there. We can't start because there is no governance framework. The data is a mess, in terms of where it is, and there's no harmonization, standardization. So you have to deal with all of that before you can take the first step. So even now, almost in 2025, I find that the first step of the journey is making sense of the data state and kind of putting some sanity around that. And then we can start having discussions. And that, I think, applies to really all sides of healthcare.
That's great. We're going to be stealing that garden metaphor. So thank you for that. Ravi, yeah, you've been doing this for a while. I mean, are you seeing, because of this hoarding aspect, are you seeing your cloud exploding with data that you're still trying to find use for? Or how are you managing that? And we'll talk a little bit more specifically about governance in a moment. But I'm just curious how you're just managing this massive amount of information
Yeah.
and justifying what should it stay or should it go?
Yeah. So I'll start from our implementation, phase, Frank. So we started our implementation in 2017. Since then, we went live with from the operational perspective, we went live with finance, supply chain, and HCM data. So from there onwards, it took us 5 to 6 years to build piece by piece. For example, we have brought in many different aspects into our warehouse, like employee engagement scores from Pressgani, our inventory details where we calculate our cycle counts and everything. On finance side, we have GL data and everything else. So we are building this piece by piece. We also have all the patient experience scores. We also have the turnovers, everything from the HCM perspective. So once we have a confidence on our warehouse and it's been used, it's not like all these 5 years the data is sitting idle, right? It's been used in our database, in our dashboards and reports
Hmm.
format. Everyone is familiar with the data. Everyone is familiar with how to consume it. Then the next step came, how can we take this forward? How can we use an artificial intelligence and machine learning models to make this work for us? Like all these different aspects of data, how do we connect it? So then we implemented something called employee attrition prediction, where we defined 28 parameters within our system, used all the data sources that we have, built a flat table, and then used machine learning algorithm models on it, and got some beautiful outputs out of the data. So yeah, we are hoarding the data as much as we can. We are
Hmm.
using those inputs throughout the years, and also we are correcting as so we are frequently analyzing it. We are frequently correcting if have any mistakes. We are evolving as we go every month, I would say.
And do you have a data retirement guide where you're setting up parameters how to retire data? I mean, are you seeing that, Esteban?
Not anymore. There
No.
used to be,
So
systems
it's
do it
still
perfect.
totally hoarding and not retirement.
Yeah, the whole like information lifecycle management thing, I just don't
Yeah.
see people don't
We
talk about.
just to add,
Mhm.
Frank, we might consider retiring it, but after COVID, it's two different things. How are things before COVID? How are things after COVID? So for that to know, we need at least 3 or 4 years data before COVID, and definitely after COVID, you need all the data that we
Because
have.
of the population health implications you're saying, right?
Exactly. Most of the parameters changed. Many needles moved this side or that side. So depending on that, we have to take that into consideration as well. So earlier we could say, yeah, 5 years data is enough, but not anymore.
Yeah, and
Since
if I
that's
may, I'll add
good.
one more thing. There, I've heard of several cases in which boards tell IT, figure out a way to monetize some of our data, with the
Hmm.
appropriate guardrails,
Hmm. Hmm.
anonymization, de-identification, tokenization, lots of different approaches. But even if you're a provider organization not involved in data science directly, and your approach is to consume AI from vendors, which is perfectly reasonable, even if you're not using that data, the data is very valuable. So the idea to monetize data that you have that you're not going to get rid of, there's a lot of discussion about that, and we've talked to a lot of customers about different strategies to do that because it is possible to do that. You have to be very careful. Obviously, there are a lot of there's I guess third, fourth, fifth rails. There are a lot of electrified
Hmm.
rails, but yet that is not really stopping anyone, and so that's one more reason to not get rid of anything, increase the hoarding because there can actually be a return on that data.
Sure, the CFOs love that part.
Indeed.
Since Esteban dropped the term, and I had a question here to follow up. The term governance has come from being sort of a snoozer, like, oh my God, we have to go to a governance meeting, and I'm going to be sick that day, to now being a really cool place to be in an enterprise because it's so complex and complicated, and it's really wrapping around the most exciting things in healthcare right now. So where are you seeing, Ravi, the governance aspects going here, especially since some of the stuff is so interconnected, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity. You mentioned patient experience a number of times. Who's managing this, and who's taking over the reins for what might have been federated data before and now having a whole new different model?
Yeah, so we have a separate team for data governance in our organization where we have guidelines on that. So we have to stick to those guidelines, and we also have periodic frequent meetings with the team. So we take their inputs, we also give our inputs. It's a mutual collaboration between both the teams. And obviously, there are some big wigs in the organization who can guide us in the right path as well,
Mhm.
including vice presidents and CIOs. So,
Mhm.
taking all these aspects and taking the help of the team, the data governance team that we have. So, it's always it's better to reveal less data or less information than to reveal more and then come back and then take a stab, basically. So we do walk on a fine thread, I would say, but for now everything is good. So hopefully it
Mhm.
stays that way.
And you're finding everyone plays well together on the governance side?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, that's a surprise. Esteban, I know
Yeah,
you mentioned some examples, but I'm just curious if there's anything you're seeing new, especially with these cross-vertical type governance bodies.
yeah. One thing that comes up a lot is how data governance is linked to moving to cloud, because we end up talking to people who, because they want to embark on a data journey, kind of, if the first step is to set up some kind of governance, the second step usually is set up some kind of data lake where you
Hmm.
can do everything with different kinds of data, structure and structure, vector, graph, doesn't really matter. And so the idea to enable your citizen data scientists, right, within the organization, whether they're analysts or physicians or finance people, it doesn't
Hmm.
really matter. So you have your dashboards, you have all the canned reports that are available, but you also have people who want to do different things with the data. So enabling them in the cloud ends up being a really interesting second step, and
Hmm.
one that you have to carefully design. You can get a lot done. So you can have a really good scenario in which citizen data scientists have access to data sets, but within the governance framework, they can only see certain things. To Ravi's point, you don't want to
Hmm.
show everything to everyone. And then there's a concept of checking out data sets, and then they expire, and then whether you actually get access to PHI or not. There's tons of discussions, but
Hmm.
better to talk about them in that framework and not just, okay, we'll do governance, well, what really for? So talking about the use cases is important, sitting down with, in our case, our customers, and understanding kind of what they want to do with this data. Is it going to be consuming it internally? Is it going to be sharing it externally? Is it for, financial forecasting? Is it anything clinical? And on and on and on. So merging kind of the governance uh, structure with the cloud movement and setting up of a data lake is kind of what I see a lot of activity under.
Really interesting. So Ravi, now that we have this governance and we're looking at AI as being a major engine behind the data strategy, how did you go about implanting Gen AI, something we're now talking about at cocktail party, just like supply chain was a few years ago? Where did you decide to implant that, and how did you develop a level of security, considering all of the crazy stories about hallucination and all the other things we love to read about in the news? Where'd you reach the safety level and the point of entry?
So, if I want to take an example, Frank, of what we did here, we already have a security model in place. For example, we have many analytics platforms at HHC. We have Oracle Analytics, we have Tableau, we have Click, we have many analytics platforms, and all of them have their own security models, including ours. So when we talk about chatbots, right, our first application that we built on chatbot is something called Analytics Hub. So when I say Analytics Hub, imagine a person or a high-level executive or even an analyst joining our organization, and they're looking for data. We have within our organization, we have like 600 plus dashboards. So for them to find out the right dashboard and right area where they want to go, whether they want to go Tableau or whichever application it is, how do they get there and how do they find that information itself is a huge mundane task. They have to attend number of KTs. They have to ask some his peers or her peers to see where he or she can get the information. So considering that in mind, we developed a chatbot where the metadata of these dashboards and also the different types of metrics that these dashboards host, including their production URL links, we have flattened out in a table and then given it to a chatbot. And using natural language processing, anyone can ask a question on the chatbot. We have built an app using Apex, Oracle Apex. So anyone can ask a question like, can you give me dashboard which has inventory? It will give you the top 3 dashboards which has inventory as one of the metrics. Can you give me dashboard regarding blood transfusion? The chatbot will give you the links to the blood transfusion dashboard. So basically, we are eliminating the human aspect. We are eliminating the KTs or whatever the time that is consumed to learn about the system and automated that part. So now what it has come to a point where we can ask the question, we can get to the dashboard within like few clicks. So we are trying to also include or build more chatbots regarding onboarding the employees, or we have many ideas regarding that. So we are taking our baby steps, but for now, it is still in UAT. Like going back to the previous question, we are using the AI governance that we have. We are going through the data governance that we have. And following the same security model, the same security model is applied on the chatbot as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we are tightly guarded app is being built and it is being in UAT, and we are building more apps on it. So now we can see the fruitful results, like all the time that we can save for these mundane tasks using these GenAI chatbots.
So the question is, as a usability guy, how do you field test this? How do you, the metaphor I use is taking the submarine below its engineered depth, where you start hearing it clinking and seeing steam coming out of the pipes. How with generative AI, and Esteban, please jump in. How do you take it to a place where we're actually purposely trying to break it to make sure where it starts acting crazy? Is there a process that you have? So not necessarily governance, but QA that tests that?
Oh, definitely. For us, the chance of illusion of the chatbot is very low because it is just acting only on the metadata that we have built,
Mm-hmm.
and that metadata is only guarded or only managed by our technical team. And also, every now and then we go in, we analyze the questions that are being asked on the chatbot, and we also analyze the results that it is giving. We have a usage tracking on the chatbot as well. So that is why I'm saying we are in UAT. It's been in UAT for the past 3 months, but we want to make absolutely sure that this is right, working perfectly well. So that is why we are
Mm-hmm.
guarding and we are also analyzing how it is working. Including our CIDO Joel Venko, who is like backbone of this app as well. He is also checking periodically. We have seen in the usage that he is also checking it periodically, which gives a good sign that the organization is interested and also wants to spend on this kind of new gen technologies that we are building.
And from an onboarding point of view, where on the food chain in terms of staff and workforce, what are the lower levels of people that can access that natural language or generative AI
Oh,
conversation?
anyone.
Anyone. Okay. So
We
it's
have
enterprise wide.
enterprise wide.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah, and I think it's important to maybe double click a little on the
Please.
training and isolation. That's something that we focus on a lot because we absolutely want to be the opposite of having something that, can see the internet, for instance. It's like a popular thing to talk about. We take, or we go to great lengths, especially in healthcare, to assure that you can train your model in isolation, and that's guaranteed architecturally, and also perform inference in isolation so
Mm-hmm.
that it's really, what Ravi was saying, it is a fit or built for purpose. It's a bespoke model for a certain organization that only has been trained with data from within the organization, and that's it. So that's one thing, and that's something that's very important to Oracle, certainly as an organization, to ensure that there is no cross talk, no contamination of data when somebody's deploying or training or deploying model. And then the other thing is having a bidirectional kind of reporting mechanism so that it's very easy if you see something that is not what you should be seeing or not expected, you can flag it and then there can be follow-up. So there's, that's kind of built in the app. And Ravi was mentioning
Mhm.
Apex. It's kind of this low code development environment that Oracle has, and it's just so easy to do anything. You don't have to go jump through 15 hoops to add a button. You can just add a
Mhm.
button. And so that all of those things together end up being very important to ensure that the model does what it's supposed to do, that you minimize very, very vastly the risk of, hallucination, also through, RAG, right? Retrieval augmented generation, which is a term that we've heard about, and also the ability to report anything and then go figure out what happened.
So the challenge for all of us is whether we're in healthcare or other fields is people that can get the information controlled within the organization, but people who leave the perimeter and do it on their own in the comfort of their own home to find it using other sources. So I mean that
Right.
the regulatory police for that part is still to be determined because everybody goes home and goes on GPT and does it on their own anyway. So I just want to jump out. You have
No, I agree. It's just, it's one of those things like, yeah, not clear how you can avoid that other than
no, it's just a human
framed in
factor.
policies, like especially, if it's data from the organization and you bring it outside, that is a bad thing. And, even it's interesting for me within Oracle, we do have a lot of guidelines, right? It's like absolutely forbidden to take any corporate data and put it in any Gen AI tool that is not Oracle's. And we have our own,
Hmm.
of course, we have a lot of
Yep.
tools. So of course, you can't control everything, but by having a very clear policy, you're setting the tone. And so if anybody chooses to go and do something that's outside of the policy, they'll have to deal with the consequences, but it's not left to chance.
Excellent. Robbie, I know that in your development, you did a lot of work with machine learning, and anytime somebody says machine learning, I always want to make sure we define it exactly what that means. And so many people get AI and machine learning confused. Could you tell me how you've used machine learning not only for helping with the diversity of the data, but also the user experiences of that data too? What the human factors again. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure, Frank. So we implemented a machine learning model to predict the employee attrition. So like I said, we began our journey with BA apps, Oracle Business Intelligence
Hmm.
applications in 2017. Since then, we are adding piece by piece patient experience, employee engagement scores, and also turnovers. So all this data we have. So when we thought that we are a matured model to implement this machine learning languages or machine learning, then we went to our senior leadership to ask for like what are they looking for out of this employee attrition prediction. So we got some clear-cut mandate to do this, and then we started on the journey. We defined 28 parameters, like what is the turnover of that particular department, how many supervisor changes are there, what is the overtime that the department went through, what are the merit increases when compared to the rest of the state. So
Hmm.
these are all and what is the distance that they are traveling for work every day, because it also plays a factor. So all these factors, we had defined 28 factors, and we took all that and we built a on-prem Python model, and we started executing it. It took 8.5 hours in the beginning.
Hmm.
Then we refined it and refined it. It was, the time did not go down, but we found some. We built a dashboard out of the results, and we gave the dashboard to the business. Business meaning anyone, any manager or any director who is managing a particular department, for example, Heart and Vascular Institute, the Cancer Institute, anyone who is managing the department can take a look at it. So we gave scores based on high risk of attrition, low risk of attrition. We gave a score to them. So we also gave factors of what is the reason that they might go to a different organization or they might leave the job. So we also gave them factors. So this kept on happening for like maybe 1 year or so. And slowly but steadily, we saw our attrition coming down. We saw the turnovers of the departments coming down. We can see the effect. So then in the last 6 months, I guess we did one more great thing. We collaborated with Oracle. We did something called Code Innovate, where we moved all our machine learning code to autonomous data warehouse. And previously it was taking 8 hours to execute. Now it is getting done in like 1 hour. So we run these models every month. We predict and we give the analysis. They have the dashboard to access this analysis. They do the analysis, and hopefully we'll see more and more turnover coming down for each and every department of ours.
Was there anything surprising that you saw during this process where you just, I didn't expect this, or whether for good or for bad? I mean, what are some of the surprises one bumps into in trying to consolidate anything on a dashboard? That's a governance issue to start out with, but any surprises?
Without revealing much, I can say the distance to travel to work is a surprise. We never thought it was a big enough factor, but we had to change our perspective on that.
Okay, very good. I just wanted to talk just a little bit about the differentiate between analytics, business intelligence, and how you define them, because it used to be, I mean, intelligence used to be the old school. We just using the words itself. Um, how do you differentiate the various functions and the differentiation between business intelligence, analytics, and some of the other AI functions? Esteban, do you see this in your work? But is it all coming together, or is it all remaining siloed?
I think a lot of places coming together, and it's more about what you get out of it. So I tend to think about it more as, well, analytics, you will get some different metrics, and you can kind of do comparisons, or you can find certain numbers that you may be looking for, from different data sets. Whereas business intelligence is more about getting actionable insights. It's kind of much broader, and it cuts across different data sets more for me. So you may be doing analytics on supply chain, or you may be doing analytics on things like I don't know, some kind of cash management in finance or something like that. But for instance, a good example of business intelligence, something that we've built, is around optimizing how long it takes to turn around a bed, especially,
Right.
pandemic situation. It really doesn't matter. And bringing in kind of all sorts of different data. It's not just data from the EHR and from timesheets. It's also data from weather. It's data from the CDC, all sorts of outside data, and having a powerful engine that can combine all those different kinds of data and also suggest things to do. So I keep thinking of something we have. It's the way we do analytics uh, in the cloud is really more, ends up being business intelligence. There's something cool that we do where you can bring in a lot of different data sources, and then for ease of consumption, because that's also another thing. There's so much data that how do you consume the insights? It's not always easy. Using Gen AI, now we can create these kind of newscast type things with avatars, and just keep the engagement and kind of digest a lot of maybe complex information into an avatar that's kind of looking at the camera and
Right.
telling a story. So it's more going in the direction of storytelling to make it easier to consume that, and that really is much more in the direction of business intelligence than kind of the simpler maybe analytics.
It's a great example. I love your example about beds, because it really is, it's the economics of aspect of just changing a bed are enormous in terms of turnover, admissions and releases. It sort of takes us back to that. We really want to look at real life examples of how this stuff changes the enterprise. I know, Ravi, that in Hartford, you started pulling some of these disparate data sources together, like traffic reports and things like that, to analyze employee turnover. I mean, I think that's sort of an interesting application of, wow, this makes a difference, because workforce is so incredibly important right now, or retaining workforce. So Ravi, could you talk a little bit about where you've actually seen real life examples of this making a difference, other than just having the visibility on Tableau or whatever the platform is?
Yeah, so we did something called item expiration detection, Frank, or prevention, you can say. For example, being in the healthcare, and we have like 500 locations within the organization, and out of which seven of them are acute care hospitals, there is a
Hmm.
lot of inventory, and every inventory has its own expiry date. So what we did with that is, and there is a lot of expiry that's happening in the organization as well. So what we did is we built an algorithm in our application where it will take in what are the items that are going about to expire, basically which has low cycle count, and it will give you a location where you can move that item so that it will get consumed before the before the item is expired. So we are seeing great results on that. It is in a dashboard model. It is very easy to easy to read the data. Basically, you will see how much inventory is about to expire. You can go through, drill to the details. You can see what is the location A get that it is getting expired, where you can move it to prevent it from expiration.
Hmm.
So the supply chain analyst or the supply chain management can act on that information and move that inventory from one place to other. So simple basic example of how we can use the business analytics data to our use case or build those algorithms to have a financial benefit out of it.
Fascinating. Could you just talk a little bit about I think that's the case you just described is fascinating. Just talk a little bit about how you use the traffic and the other outside data sources in terms of looking at employee retention.
Sure. So one of the factor is how much distance are they traveling, how much distance are they traveling to work? Meaning we have the employee address, we have their work location address, and
Mhm.
we also have Oracle Analytics Cloud, meaning we are on the Oracle Analytics Cloud for the reporting side. So we have a map perspective in our OAC as well. So we have something called market penetration,
Mhm.
meaning how many of the nurses are available in that county and how many of the nurses are working for Hartford Healthcare. So if a employee or if a nurse practitioner or if any other employee is traveling longer distances for the work location, and if there is another facility which doesn't belong to HHC that is available very nearby to them, the the probability of employee going to that facility is more because here
Mhm.
he or she might have to travel more, maybe in a different county. So that becomes an actionable point, an actionable intelligence point for the manager. He or she can sit down with the employee and talk whether they can move them to a nearby location for the work, for their
Mhm.
work. So that is the actionable intelligence we are getting based on, again, if you want to write an algorithm, if you want to calculate these distances for all the employees using an algorithm and then plug into the data source, it will be a huge task. But since we are using machine learning, it is all automated and everything is like day and night.
That's great. That's two great examples. And Esteban, any other ones that you have that you've seen out there? I mean, the beds were great. Any novel
Yeah, another one I'm thinking
applications?
about is something we did with another provider customer, which was going, building or training a neural network that really was an LLM to look at clinical notes in the EHR and extract ICD codes from the clinical
Mm,
note, the free text clinical notes. And
mm,
obviously you need NLP, you need entity extraction, you
mhm,
need the right ontology, in this case was ICD. And the reason for doing that was not really clinical. It was to compare the ICD codes that were extracted from the clinical notes to the ICD codes that were being submitted in the insurance claims to
mhm.
make sure that nothing was overlooked or nothing, that there was no mismatch. Because as we know, when a claim is rejected, about 60% of the time, I think it's not resubmitted. And so it creates ultimately a financial burden on the provider. So if you can streamline that and make the claims that you send out more accurate so that they have a lower probability of being rejected for
Mhm.
obvious things like well, this is the wrong ICD code, or you're
Right.
missing this, or this patient also has that, or whatever the case may be. And that was a game changer because we know that unstructured data, in this case the clinical nodes, have a ton of data that's kind of locked in that unstructured format.
Right.
Even if it's in the EHR, it's not structured, it's not making it to the fields, right? And so therefore, when you push data out of the EHR to the billing system, for instance, that's kind of lost in translation. So this is kind of AI, using data as oxygen for the AI journey without going and touching the third rail. So it's like a totally different
Right. Right.
looking at it.
So as we get into advanced AI, I wrote an article a few years ago about the Shakespearean aspects of doctors calling their procedures things that flattered themselves, that there was no ICD code for it. So we could get to a point where artificial intelligence says, wait a second, this is Harry's code or Mary's code here, Dr. Mary, Dr. Harry.
We do that already,
Yeah.
right? Harmonizing language, because
Mhm.
actually it's interesting that there have been linguists studying provider organizations, and they find that dialects form even in different wings, like,
Mhm.
fourth floor, east wing and west wing, they have a different dialect.
So a wing dialect.
Yes.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. We'll have to do another show on dialects. So that's great. So I mean, going back to the more mundane, but probably the most important part of this, especially from Oracle's side, I mean, people want to make sure that they're getting what they invested in. People are watching this. Everybody is having a sugar rush over artificial intelligence, generative AI. Everybody has to do it, and then suddenly somebody pumps on the brakes and says, "Wait a second, what's the business case here? What's the business value?" So between the two of you, I mean, Esteban, you're on the vendor side, obviously, and you're making these calls along with your sales folks, and Robbie, you're justifying your investments. What are you seeing are the metrics, Esteban, that these companies are using to justify increased cloud? Obviously, there's a need for increased storage because storage is never ending in terms of where we are in the genesis of data. What are some of the numbers where the CFO will say, now I got it? And I used to publish the dummies books. So, what is the AI finance for dummies for CFOs?
It goes back to the basics, right? So we don't do AI for the sake of doing AI. When we engage, we're looking for a specific problem. Then when we're building, maybe a pilot that can then be taken to production, we quantify very clearly which metrics we're looking to hit. So for
Mhm.
instance, if you go back to the bed turnover, right? That real example, and something that we actually show at conferences, because it shows very
It's
well.
empirical. Yep.
And we have this what if kind of predictor. So and ultimately it's just simple revenue, right? How much can you save if you are able to, I don't know, lower the time it takes for housekeeping to get to the room by 20%, and then you churn it all out, and then it turns out that, well, that's $500,000 a year,
Hmm.
things like that. So we're not kind of going of doing very complicated things to find the right metric to justify it. uh, the project has to be self-evident, so
Hmm.
yeah, savings, right? Or you can see more patients, or if it's ER flow, so kind of very simple things that people are already looking at, that we can say, well, if you implement this, then you're gonna see this savings. And this is something that we've adopted from the cloud side as well. So it's not that go to cloud because it's cool. It's go to cloud because if you go to cloud, we can show you with evidence that you're going to save 50 million a year, or whatever the case may be. So it's taking that same approach and then just using it with AI. But this is really because of kind of the DNA of Oracle for 47 years
Sure.
of dealing with business applications. And it's kind of the same thing. We're using different words, but ultimately it's about kind of business problem, our solution, and kind of what it means at the very high level, top line or bottom line to the business.
Very helpful. Robbie, when you go into the finance group or however you do your reporting at the board level, what are some of the metrics you're using to show empirical evidence that this investment is paying off?
Yeah, for example, if I go back to both the examples that I spoke to, Frank, for example, the analytics hub, right?
Hmm.
So we wanted, because we are expanding or growing on our data and digital footprint is growing every day. We wanted to have this analytics hub in our organization since the past 1 year. So if we, to be frank, we even evaluated some tools around that. So the cost associated to get the tools and to pay for the maintenance every year
Hmm.
was also associated with that. So it was just a light bulb moment, like why can't we build our own HHC? In short, Hartford Healthcare in short is called HHC. So why don't we build our own analytics hub sort of thing? It started like that. It started as a light bulb moment. So
Hmm.
we already have access to Oracle Apex. We started using it. We built a homepage. We gave a pretty mundane search functionality to it, and then and then we thought of adding more search capabilities. So then that is when the GenAI came in, and that is when we added that GenAI or natural language search to that app. So it's
Hmm.
organic basically. We did not want to implement Gen AI and then started this, but we started with this and thought if we add Gen AI, then it will be more useful because there could be
Hmm.
typos, there could be grammatical mistakes. People might be looking for something else but don't know how to search for it. So Gen AI chatbot understands and gives you the right results. So that is one aspect on how we basically said Gen AI is the way for this app. And coming to the second example of employee attrition prediction, it costs a lot. I was told it costs a lot to replace a nurse practitioner, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and if the nurse practitioner that was replaced leaves the organization within 2 years, all that investment is not it goes to waste. So the best way to handle this is to reduce the turnover. Everyone speaks about it, but not everyone knows how to basically reduce the turnover. Right? There are some factors which are in our hands, some without, which are not in our hands. So if we can give the managers or directors or whoever is maintaining the departments the generic picture of what are the factors that might contribute to their turnover, then they can, if they can act on it, and if they even can retain like 50% or at least 10% of the workforce that is getting migrated or
Hmm.
moving to different organizations, I think that is a huge win. And the cost associated is like paid 10 times over.
Yeah, this gets into the other part of it, which is something that I've been covering, what I'm calling compassion IT, compassionomics is another term for it, that the Cooper people down in Jersey use, and the whole burnout aspect, which is always something that's related to the one of the number one reasons that there's a workforce problem. Obviously, driving to work might be part of that, but getting to work is burnout, and being able to quantify to the financial people that we've reduced burnout by 20%, because that's not an easy metric to come up with. It's not a needle on a scale saying, okay, I've gone from 10 on burnout to 7 right now. So I mean, that's going to be more and more important to find those softer sides too. I think one of the ones we're getting relatively close to the end, but I wanted to make sure I covered the fact that, it used to be that there was a one trick pony that providers and any kind of company, whether healthcare or not, put all their eggs in one basket for their vendors. Now we're finding that it's diffuse in terms of the number of partners that companies work with, and healthcare companies especially work with, to get the job done, because they're either reluctant to put all the eggs in one basket, or they feel that there's variations in theme in terms of how they have to deploy these kinds of technologies, whether it be cloud or otherwise. Esteban, what are you seeing in terms of, I mean, you're now in a position where you have to, just by the nature of the market, have to collaborate with sometimes strange bedfellows.
Indeed, yeah, it's fascinating, right? And the maybe most glaring example is having the CEO of AWS on stage at Oracle Cloud World just a couple months ago. And, I've been here for two
Does not
years at
compute.
Oracle. I know a lot of people have been at Oracle for 15, 20, 25 years, and it's sort of it's a cognitive dissonance moment because that was very, very
Mhm.
unexpected. And we've had the same with Larry Ellison and Satya Nadella, you know, getting together and broadcasting a message. And so that's certainly on the cloud side. it's fascinating because it used to be that cloud providers were trying to hoard customers. And it's like, you're going to be in my cloud. It's my walled garden. We give you everything you could possibly need, and you'll be happy here, never leave, Hotel California type of situation. And now it's exactly what you said, different nuances of how you do things. And, we don't need to get in the details, but absolutely sort of this idea of multi-cloud, yeah, we do live in a multi-cloud world. And it's been pretty fascinating to see what Oracle has been doing because we've reached out. And so now we have collaborations with AWS, with Google Cloud, with Azure, almost unheard of. And
Mhm.
the idea is everybody wins because certainly no one is going to do it. We're not charities, it's clear, but customers win because they can do what they want with the data, where the data is in the way that they want. And then the cloud providers, get, they get a win as well. So there's no need to, so the analogy that we keep hearing is, we want to bust open the walled garden, right? The walled garden is no more
Mhm.
now. We want to build bridges, across and have people kind of go from one to the other. And, especially in this world where, it's a cliche now that data has gravity. Well, you want to bring tools to the data. You don't want to be moving data. So wherever the data
Mhm.
is, bring the analytics to it, bring the AI to it, bring the reporting or visualization or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. And only by having this construct of a multi-cloud world where it's very seamless to do whatever you need wherever you need it, can you get there? And we're actually pretty close now. It's really quite interesting.
Robbie, how do you go about managing the multi-cloud or community cloud or whatever the name that they're giving it to it this month would be? I mean, it must be a very complex organizational challenge sometimes to get everyone to play together.
Yeah, without a doubt, we are also multi-cloud shop, Frank. We have Google Cloud. I think we have presence in Azure, and the particular business entity that I manage is particularly related to Oracle Cloud (OCI).
Mhm.
But we source data from different clouds. I think it is the way to go, and many organizations are doing it, to be frank. It's all about how easily we can connect to those data sources and bring in the data that we need, and how effectively we manage that multi-cloud environments. It comes down to that.
So, I mean, the elephant in the room these days, just especially this past year, is how do we keep this data safe? Cybersecurity, again, in terms of governance, they all have to sing together. We're finding that more and more chief information security officers are being involved in data storage decisions for obvious reasons. I was even working with a term that has array storage, more on the hardware side of storage side. And what's the CISO have to do with array storage? But they do. It's all part of their job. So, Esteban, could you tell me where you're seeing this integration of security? Obviously, it's there. Obviously, it's the highest priority. And with the widespread nature of where these security breaches are happening in places that seem totally unrelated, how you go about auditing and making sure that this data is safe with trusted partners.
Yeah, yeah. For us, it's about starting with zero trust. And that's the way OCI was designed. Like everything is essentially forbidden by default. So if you want anything to happen, you have to, explicitly allow it.
Mhm.
Then the other thing is behavioral analytics, which a lot of people are doing, and it's fine. You want to make sure that it's not just looking at the surface, but just analyzing patterns and seeing what different users may be doing and kind of catching things that just make no sense, right? Like
Mhm.
possible travel is an example that people often talk about. And then the third leg is automation, right? A lot of these things that we see end up being human error, and we want to make sure that that is removed from the equation because people, it's like there's no need to have people click something 50 times or just the things
Mhm.
that are not necessary just shouldn't be required. And so if you have a policy, you can enable that policy and then everything will conform to it just by definition. So this idea that, well, we see a lot of examples where somebody forgot to give the right permissions to an object storage bucket, and now you have this bucket of medical imaging that's open to the world for years, and no one is kind of realizing
Right.
that. And so we see example after example after example. So just have people do what they do best, which is kind of design things, but that implementation, there is really a lot of evidence that automating it through policies is better, so that you don't leave things up to chance.
Robbie, how close is your CISO involved in your day-to-day work?
Um, um, Almost every day, I can say, Frank, we have a separate security team that handles security of our system, and there are periodic checks, and we also have audits going on every year. So we define the security layer of our organization, and we give it to the team, our ERP security team that manages the security of our application. We make sure everything is intact on water sealed. After that, it's just like Esteban said, we did the automation straight away, and then we are just building on that automation that we have built. And the audits and periodic checks keep us in place.
Fantastic. Just as a closing question, we're coming to a wrap here. I'm curious, and I ask this at the end of all of my webinars. We have the fear of missing out, where everybody has to jump on the hype curve and be part of it. But I've talked to more and more CIOs that had JOMO, the joy of missing out.
Right.
Are there any things, and Esteban, you're out there in the field a lot. I mean, what are some of the things where people have said, I'm really glad I sat on my hands and let this one pass?
This is just my opinion, right? It's not
That's not Oracle. Okay.
right, not Oracle, but I would say virtual reality in healthcare, just so much hype and just not enough. It's like, oh, it's going to solve everything, surgical training, and it's going to solve, HR training, and
What do we do now?
all
Yeah.
sorts of things, and just hasn't really delivered. I mean, it may in the future, but I think we're probably in that trough of disillusionment.
The Gartner folks. Yeah. I like to use that a lot. Robbie, is there anything you sat on your hands and said, look, this is really, really cool, but it's just not ready for prime time yet?
For us, necessity drives our invention or innovation, Frank. So for me, I have not encountered that kind of scenario yet. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure it's coming. So I think I don't see any additional questions from our studio audience here. So I just wanted to thank you both. This was exciting, very informative. Appreciate your insights, and thank you to our audience for joining Chime Digital Health Insights webinar sponsored by Oracle. We thank you very much.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good job.